Good evening, dear friends, and welcome to July's bonus video. I'm not sure what's happened with the lighting. As I started, there was like a really nice warm glow, and now I look a little bit ghoulish, but it's fine. We talked earlier in the month about nonsense poems, and I attributed the one that I'm going to start out with to Spike Milligan, and I was incorrect. So it made my searching for it quite difficult because I was searching for I couldn't remember the name of the poem. Turns out the name of the poem is what I thought was the first line. It's not. But I was searching for what I thought was the first line with Spike Milligan. It was a whole thing. But I have for you this poem and a short story, which is something we've also talked about this month. So this is One Fine Day in the Middle of the Night by Magnus Montgomery Blackthorn. Ladies and gentlemen, skinny and stout, I'll tell you a tale I know nothing about. The admission is free, so pay at the door. Now pull up a chair and sit on the floor. One fine day in the middle of the night, two dead boys got up to fight. Back to back they faced each other, drew their swords and shot each other. A blind man came to watch fair play. A mute man came to shout hooray. A deaf policeman heard the noise and came to stop those two dead boys. He lived on the corner in the middle of the block in a two-story house on a vacant lot. A man with no legs came walking by and kicked the lawman in his thigh. He crashed through a wall without making a sound into a dry creek bed and suddenly drowned. The long black hearse came to cart him away, but he ran for his life and is still gone today. I watched from the corner of a big round table, the only eyewitness to facts of my fable. But if you doubt my lies are true, just ask the blind man. He saw it too. I cannot for the life of me remember where or when I first heard that. But it's implanted very deep in my brain. And it's just while I can't attach it to anything, it's a fun literary memory. Yeah, it holds a fond place for me. Just nice feelings. I hope you enjoyed that. To our story, I misquoted the title of this, but we had a poem from this author a few days ago. It's Rudyard Kipling, and this is one of his Just So stories. And I told you about how the Just So stories are stories about how animals got certain characteristics. As I was researching this, there's also a story about how the alphabet came to be. How the first word was written. Some of the animal origins is how the whale got his throat. How the camel got his hump, which I think was one I mentioned in our video the other week. I believe how the leopard got his spots was on there. And this one, which I misquoted, which I'm going to share with you today, is how the rhinoceros got his skin, not the elephant. The elephant one that I was thinking of is the elephant's child. but this is definitely the one I remembered. It's about the skin. So what I'm going to share with you now is How the Rhinoceros Got His Skin by Rudyard Kipling. Once upon a time, bear with me. Once upon a time, on an uninhabited island on the shores of the Red Sea, there lived a Parsee, from whose hat the rays of the sun were reflected in more than oriental splendour. And the Parsee lived by the Red Sea with nothing but his hat and his knife and a cooking stove, of the kind that you must particularly never touch. And one day he took flour and water and currants and plums and sugar and things, and made himself one cake which was 2 feet across and 3 feet thick. It was indeed a superior comestible, that's magic. And he put it on the stove because he was allowed to cook on the stove. And he baked it until it was done brown and smelt most sentimental. But he was just going to eat it there. Came down to the beach from the altogether uninhabited interior, one rhinoceros with a horn on his nose, 2 piggy eyes, and few manners. In those days, the rhinoceros' skin fitted him quite tight. There were no wrinkles in it anywhere. He looked exactly like a Noah's Ark rhinoceros, but of course much bigger. All the same, he had no manners then, and he has no manners now. And he never will have any manners. He said, "How?" And the Parsee left the cake and climbed to the top of the palm tree with nothing on but his hat, from which the rays of the sun were always reflected in more than oriental splendour. And the rhinoceros upset the oil stove with his nose, and the cake rolled in the sand, and he spiked that cake on the horn of his nose, and he ate it. And he went away, waving his tail, to the desolate and exclusively uninhabited interior, which abuts on the island of Mazadanaran, Socotra, and promontories of the larger equinox. Then the Parsee came down from his palm tree and put the stove on its legs and recited the following sloka, which, as you have not heard, I will now proceed to relate. Them that takes cakes, which the Parsee man bakes, makes dreadful mistakes. And there was a great deal more in that than you would think. Because 5 weeks later, there was a heat wave in the Red Sea, and everybody took off all the clothes they had. The Parsee took off his hat, but the rhinoceros took off his skin and carried it over his shoulder as he came down to the beach to bathe. In those days, it was buttoned underneath with 3 buttons and looked like a waterproof. He said nothing whatever about the Parsee's cake because he had eaten it all, and never had any manners, then, since, or henceforth. He waddled straight into the water and blew bubbles through his nose, leaving his skin on the beach. Presently, the Parsee came by and found the skin, and he smiled one smile that ran all round his face 2 times. Then he danced 3 times around the skin and rubbed his hands. Then he went to his camp and filled his hat with cake crumbs, for the Parsee never ate anything but cake, and never swept out his camp. He took that skin, and he shook that skin, and he scrubbed that skin, and he rubbed that skin just as full of old, dry, stale, tickly cake crumbs and some burned currants as it ever could possibly hold. Then he climbed to the top of his palm tree and waited for the rhinoceros to come out of the water and put it on. there's a wonderful illustration. It's great, an app description. And the rhinoceros did. He buttoned it up with the 3 buttons, and it tickled like cake crumbs in bed. Then he wanted to scratch, but that made it worse. And then he lay down on the sands and rolled and rolled and rolled. And every time he rolled, the cake crumbs tickled him worse and worse and worse. Then he ran to the palm tree and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed himself against it. He rubbed so much and so hard that he rubbed his skin into a great fold over his shoulders and another fold underneath where the buttons used to be, but he rubbed the buttons off. And he rubbed some more folds over his legs, and it spoiled his temper, but it didn't make the least difference to the cake crumbs. They were inside his skin, and they tickled. So he went home, very angry indeed, and horribly scratchy. And from that day to this, every rhinoceros has great folds in his skin and a very bad temper, all on account of the cake crumbs inside. But the Parsee came down from his palm tree, wearing his hat, from which the rays of the sun were reflected in a more than oriental splendour, packed up his cooking stove, and went away in the direction of Orotavo, Ameligda, and upland meadows of Antario, and the marshes of Sonoput. This uninhabited island is off Cape Goffardi, by the beaches of Socarto and the pink Arabian Sea, but it's hot. Too hot from Suez for the likes of you and me ever to go in a P&O and call on the cake Parsee. And that is how the rhinoceros got his skin. I absolutely adore the Just So stories. If there is interest, I may well do a bit of research and see if I can pick up a book of the stories and maybe do a series reading through them for you all. Heck, I'd love to do it for myself. But yeah, that's a little self-indulgent. If it's something that folks would enjoy, I would very much love to share that with you. But yes, the rhinoceros. We have the explanation as to why they are quite so grumpy and wrinkly. And apparently they love cake. Same. Thank you so much for spending another month with me, friends. I do hope that you've had fun. And maybe the time we've spent together has brought you some comfort. If things have been difficult for you at any time this month, or at any point, I'm aware, of course, that you could be watching this video any time of the day, week, month, or year. I hope these videos help. I know they help me. being able to look into my little camera with the little blue light around it and talk to you all is definitely beneficial to my wonky brain. So thank you for bearing with me. It's very much appreciated. I think after that lovely little story, as I'm feeling quite sleepy, I'm going to go and get into bed. And hopefully, we will all have a very good